Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
There have been many shocking discoveries in the wake of the Grenfell tragedy, and sadly today another has come to light. News at 10 has learned a crucial disaster support plan formulated years ago was simply never triggered on the night. This latest revelation is just one of hundreds submitted to the public inquiry ahead of a deadline today. Those running it now have to decide its scope and its terms of reference. And with such a vast and complex task, it's likely those desperate for answers fast are likely to be disappointed.
The twisted shell of this building throws up many questions. Tonight saw a milestone towards the inquiry that aims to get the answers. And News at 10 has details of one submission raising new concerns about remarkable gaps in emergency preparations.
It's really, really important that we learn the lessons.
Disaster response expert Tony Thompson says those failings rob survivors of vital help.
We're looking at shelter, we're looking at housing, we're looking at food, somewhere to stay, somewhere away from the emergency.
The submission sent to the Grenfell inquiry by senior emergency professionals has been seen by ITV News. It says the risk register, a legally required assessment of potential public dangers, failed to mention tower block fires at all. A well-rehearsed humanitarian assistance plan which specifies practical and emotional help to be given to casualties was never put into action, and that Kensington and Chelsea Council repeated poor responses highlighted in a role-play exercise just 15 months earlier. This is that role-play which tested response to a major incident. The council in charge at Grenfell took part in this and received detailed recommendations on emergency response. Alison Moses says she and other survivors were let down because those lessons were not learned.
How does it feel to know there was a plan there, but it wasn't being used?
I'm absolutely disgusted to know that a plan was in place, but yet for all they chose not to use it, and they just left us to our own devices basically.
At tonight's deadline for submissions on the inquiry's scope, 330 responses had been received. Next week, the chair, Sir Martin Moore-Bick, will send his proposal to the Prime Minister. She's expected to make a decision on the scale of the inquiry the following week. 2 stages are predicted. The first looking at immediate causes, with an interim report in around 12 months. The second, on broader issues, will take longer. But this inquiry lawyer believes expectations are too high.
Really, whether there has been sort of institutionalised discrimination in respect of the people who lived in the block who were social housing tenants. Those are the sort of things I think that people want it to look at, but how wide it can go in looking at those things is maybe another question.
In pitiful clusters, notes around Grenfell Tower cry out to be heard. Every day without answers is yet more delay in the process of rebuilding shattered lives.
So, Chris, that deadline came this evening. The next step to establish the scope of the inquiry, and even that in itself is not without risk.
No, it's not. Some people question that very idea that it should be government that decides ultimately on the scope of this inquiry. You've got to remember that prior to 2005, it would have been the job solely of the inquiry chair, but there were building concerns about the scale and the cost of public inquiries. After all, the Bloody Sunday inquiry cost nearly £200 million. So now we've got this new rule, which means it's the government's job to decide, but that is not uncontroversial.
And there are criminal investigations to be carried out too. How does that sit alongside the inquiry and indeed affect its timetable potentially?
It is another big difficulty. The principle has always been that justice for individuals is always more important than these very important inquiries, and so often the court cases have had to be put on hold until we have the inquiries. And to give you an example of the kind of timescales I'm talking about here, there was another tower block fire in London in 2009. Now, the criminal investigation in that case took 3.5 years. And of course, the problem for the residents, for the survivors, for all concerned, is that as these timescales stretch out, the focus, the anger, even the proposals themselves get diluted. So where we are tonight, I suppose, is that we all are looking for answers, but there's yet no agreement on the questions or even when those questions will be asked.
Indeed, and we're going to be talking about this for a very long time yet. Chris, thank you very much for that.
I've been getting away with it all